Welcome back, friends. In this quick video, we'll be talking about the basics of bioinformatics because in the future video lectures, we'll be covering bioinformatics as our topic. So, at the very beginning, we must know what is bioinformatics and what is its importance to us and why we are studying bioinformatics. So, let's begin with what is bioinformatics in the very first place. Okay. So bioinformatics is actually it deals with computational management and analysis of biological information. Biological information means genes, genomes, proteins, cells, ecological systems, medical information, robotics, and all these things together. Now, in a very easy understanding of bioinformatics can be if I tell you that bioinformatics is a perfect combination of computer as well as biology. So it's a marriage between biology and computer. Now we utilize the informatics techniques and imply them onto the biological information processing. Biological information like genes, genomes, protein sequence and structure and all these things to finally get what we want. Now what we want actually using this kind of biological information processing units, we want answers for several questions. For example, say you have discovered a new protein sequence. You don't know the sequence previously. Now what we can do, utilizing the known sequences that are available in the planet, we can look for whether this our newly discovered sequence is similar to any one of this known protein sequence or not. And by looking at it, we can tell the exact or not exact, but we can tell roughly the what might be the function of that newly discovered amino acid sequence or newly discovered protein. Okay, so this is one of the applications. There are many more applications out there. Application for genes and genomes, application in protein biology. Structural biologists are the most beneficial from this bioinformatics because in structural biology what we need to do, we need to construct 3D figure because structural biologists want 3D figures because 3D figure of proteins will give us the clear cut understanding of its functionality. So we can get this 3D structure, then utilizing this 3D structure and protein interaction studies, we can get our desired results, right? So what we want functionality of the protein, and we know to know functionality of the protein, the structure of the protein plays a very important role. Now here, for understanding of the protein function, we must require the protein 3D structure, from where we can construct the 3D structure from the raw sequence that we can generate using the sequencing machines. There are protein sequencing machines out there, and we know how to sequence amino acid or peptide sequences. From these peptide sequences, if we can construct a 3D predicted model of, or most probable model of this protein sequence, then we can utilize it for the function analysis of that protein, because the structure of protein dictates its function, right? So we can find this property of evolution of genes, genomes, proteins and metabolic pathways inside the cell. Now if we are dealing with genes, it is called genomics. If we are dealing with genes or genomes, it will be called genomics. If we are dealing with proteins, it will be called proteomics. And if we are dealing with the metabolic pathways inside the cell and the protein interactions and the metabolite interaction, we call it metabolomics. So there are several different parts of bioinformatics study: genomics, proteomics, metabolomics, and all these things. What we are interested in, we are interested in the interaction pattern of these molecules inside the cell, because remember, the central dogma of biology is the most important concept. So what we are having DNA sequence, which is the mother of all, which is the head inside the cell, which is having all the coding regions and regulatory sites also. And in eukaryotic system, they are having also the junk materials or the introns, we all know. From these coding regions, it will produce the transcripts, which are mRNA most of the case. Now this mRNA will be translated to proteins. This is the central dogma, and we need to understand the central dogma and how the information is being processed through this central dogma. And we can understand this by studying each of this segment, right? This DNA or transcripts or proteins, right? So it builds mathematical models for all of these step by step processes. That means the DNA to DNA replication, DNA to RNA transcription, and RNA to protein translation. So all of these processes are known, and utilizing a computational based model, we can actually computing all these facts, and we can build our predicted model for this process. to infer relationship between the components of the complex biological system, because the biological system is consisting of million different types of proteins, RNAs and DNAs on all these things, how they are interacting to give us life, and what is life actually, and how all these things are working coordinately, we can find using bioinformatics. Now, the global approaches towards global approaches towards the new system biology can be from this bioinformatics studies. So the question that we want to ask is, how does the spatial and temporal organization of the living matter give rise to biological process? This is a question, age-old question actually, coming out in our minds from the ancient times. Now it's a time for answering these questions, and we can uh, go very closer to answer this kind of questions by using bioinformatics. Now we can say this is the global cell state. Now from here we can get genomes, genome activation partners or patterns, that means transcriptomics, then proteomics, and also metabolomics are there. Now the organization of this all materials we can infer using different techniques like electron microscopy of the cells, tissue imaging techniques using fluorescent dyes, X-ray, as well as NMR spectroscopy, right? So utilizing all these different processes, we can actually tell what are the structure, what is the sequence of DNA or protein, and utilizing those sequence, from the sequence we can go towards the 3D structure prediction. From that we can get our desired functionality or a predicted functionality of our newly discovered protein. Then we can take our protein, and we can do further experiment utilizing the idea that you have got utilizing this bioinformatics. Now again, bioinformatics is definitely not doing anything in the real world. It is creating a virtual image of our living system. So if we look at the living cell, from the perturbation of a living cell, what we get, a dynamic process. So everything is happening inside the cell is dynamic in nature, like proteins are there, RNAs are there, DNAs are there, everything are there, and they're interacting with each other. They're carrying what they're carrying, information. Now if we can create this model virtually using computer based techniques, what we can do, by simulation we can look for the way they act, right, and the way the proteins, DNA and RNA are working. If we understand that process, it should be very very important for us, right? So if we get the biological knowledge, then sequence information as well as structural information, if all these things, if we can feed all these things inside a computer, we can get what we call a virtual cell simulation inside the brain of computer. And utilizing bioinformatics, mathematical modeling, simulation, as well as utilizing the statistical analysis, what we can get, the basic principle which are governing the cell, as well as this basic principle will tell us how to go towards the practical approaches to prove our hypothesis, right? So this is the important part about the bioinformatics, right? So we can gather all this, we know biology, we know the biology of proteins, the nucleotides, as well as lipids and all these things. So we can, mostly bioinformatics is used for proteins and DNA analysis nowadays. Maybe in future it can be applied to many more things. Nowadays vigorously it is used for protein and nucleotide analysis. Now we can get all these informations, we made a virtual of it. Utilizing bioinformatics, mathematical modeling and simulation, we finally get our basic principles which are governing the cell. From that we can infer the practical applications, we can go for the practical applications. Now bioinformatics is connecting biology to all the different systems. So it's connected to the molecular biology, actually it's a treat for molecular biologists and structural biologists. Then obviously it is attached to the molecular evolution, it helps us to understand molecular evolution. It is directly linked to biophysics and as well as mathematics and computer science. It is involving with genomics, as well as uh, ethical, legal and social implications are also important, because we are dealing with the predicted things. So nothing is real in this case, everything is virtual. But obviously the informations that we feed onto the machine, like this background knowledge, biological knowledge, which is also computerized, but also this biological knowledge and also sequence information that we feed onto this computer system, definitely should be real. For example, say if you get a new protein, you sequence the protein, then we add the protein onto this database. That means we are adding the real sequence, right? We are not doing any virtual thing there. because if we put any virtual thing there, it should in those cases it can it can't be anything, right? We cannot rely on those things. It can only be a game, computer game, but it is not a game because we are feeding some real information to the system, and then what we are creating a virtual organization of this information as a virtual cell. From that we are getting the response, right? It is actually helping us to understand what is actually going on inside the cell. Now we know a cell is so tiny that we cannot visualize it without a microscope, right? We cannot visualize it with our naked eye, but still there are so many things are going on inside the cell, we cannot figure it out, and we are unable to figure it out still now with this advanced technology. So we need to create a replica of this cell in computerized system using bioinformatics. So this is in a sense bioinformatics, and in the next video we'll be talking about the data types and different types of databases and what are databases, what are their importance. Okay.